Hello and welcome to the Beyond Biotech podcast number 49. I'm Jim Cornell from the Biotech and still no rain here. I'm really feeling for those in North America suffering with the air quality issues caused by the forest fires. It's really terrible what's happening over there, although of course there are issues in other places too. I do remember covering forest fires when I was editor of a newspaper, and the fire is all you can smell for days. I took the family on a lightning trip to Liverpool this weekend for no other reason than a Beatles-obsessed son. Not good timing with there being a train strike, but it was still fun, other than the trials and tribulations of hay fever season, and that's a reason for my voice sounding slightly different this week. Today's podcast is going out on June the 9th, which I'm reliably informed is National Strawberry Rhubarb Pie Day. I'm definitely not celebrating. Not that I have anything against strawberries or rhubarb, but this week we're not talking about fruit, we're talking about precision medicine with Tero Silvola, CEO at BC Platforms, and also hearing about the company's acquisition of pharma. And so now it is time for our weekly look at some of the week's news headlines that you may have missed over at Labiotech.eu. We had an article on bacterial resistance genes being a threat to human health. There was our monthly look at the biggest private biotech investments, and a rabies vaccine received approval for a phase 3 trial. Shasky is using click chemistry to target cancer. Head and neck cancer data were presented at ASCO 2023, which seems like it's been an incredibly busy and fruitful event. And in Canada, Oncopol received $5.5 million in funding to tackle cancer. Not sure whether that was Canadian or US dollars. We had an article on 10 Swedish companies spearheading the country's biotech scene, a look at how Ireland is at the forefront of using AI to help life science companies, and Avantgarde closed €61 million in financing to move its gene delivery program into the clinic. Nordics has been given the go-ahead to start a phase 3 trial for cerebral adrenoleukodystrophy patients. We had an article on 6 companies that have made their name in the cardiovascular space. Kate Therapeutics has launched with $51 million to develop genetic medicines for muscle and heart diseases, and Acepodia raised $100 million financing to boost cell therapies. MedLife Discoveries in Canada is starting a trial for children with RCDP. Okin is powering a new era in oncology research with Mosaic, and that is a $50 million spatial atlas of cancer cells. And Astellas is developing a new gastric cancer drug. Quell has signed a potential $2 billion cell therapy deal with AstraZeneca, and you can read all of these and many more at Labiotech.eu. So now it's time for this week's interview, and it's with a company that was in the news this week for an acquisition, and we'll hear a little about that later in the conversation. But first we talk about precision medicine, among other things. So this week's guest is Tero Silvola, CEO at BC Platforms. I wonder if first we could kind of dive into precision medicine, if you could kind of explain what precision medicine is and how it's evolved to where we are now.
Okay, so this is Tero Silvola speaking. For me, precision medicine is very much what BC Platform's mission statement tries to explain. So the reason of existence for us is all about precision medicine. For me and for our company, it means basically an intersection between healthcare and life science. As an example, healthcare data has today lots of really, really valuable, insightful data in the databases, in different registries, EMR systems and data lakes. And that healthcare data can be converted to impactful insights at the life science side. So when life science is then, with the very extensive and long R&D process, aiming to develop the drugs and molecules for actual use, the whole idea is that they are really well targeted. The population is well characterized. And of course, you can actually measure the impact of those solutions. So for us, it's kind of like an infinity loop, making sure healthcare value chain is connected to the life science. And the ultimate purpose is to give better treatment with a better timing and with the better medicine to you and me, citizens and patients. So that's how I would verbalize what precision medicine is all about.
I assume that it's changing constantly.
It is. Looking at with the perspective, two main drivers that are transforming and changing it. Number one, right now, technology itself and different platforms are taking quantum leaps, big leaps. If you look backwards, AI, machine learning, different type of algorithms, they were not available. You didn't have the right infrastructure, right tools to develop those software capabilities that you would be able to do today. So technology is really changing fast. The second is access to this sensitive, good quality information is becoming available as well. Maybe a third one that influences a lot is all the omics data. As an example, genomic data as such. It was too expensive to produce only 10 years ago. The value price points, they were well beyond tens of thousands of euros or USDs, even hundreds of thousands per sample if you consider whole exome and whole genome data. And now the price point is getting below MRI image. So obviously that access to that sort of a complex biological information is different than it was 10 years ago.
Is it in some ways difficult to keep up with the technology because as the technology develops so quickly? Are you able to utilize that capacity or to utilize that, I guess, increase in capacity of what it can do?
Good question. What BC Platforms aims to do, we are a platform company, and as such, we don't need to develop all those algorithms and predictive models or biomarker tools and all those AI capabilities ourselves. We need to be, however, well embedded into those ecosystems and centers of excellence where this development takes place. So for us, it's crucial and very important to partner with the right institutions. There are everyday new super interesting startups popping up from these ecosystems. And if our brand is well enough, brand awareness is there, and we get to connect these companies, that will keep us up to date all the time. But it's mission impossible to develop everything in-house. Exactly to your point, it's the pace is fast, and every day you find out that this capacity actually should be connected to the platform.
And is there enough data? I'm sure that in some fields there's a lot, but in others, I'm thinking about geographically and different races, different genders. Is there enough data to work on so that you can get better results?
We have been every now and trying to do kind of like a theoretical exercise. What is enough, and is there actually an N that would be sufficient with the demand? But we have never come up with the actual number or N that would actually make us comfortable and so on. So I would rather say that what has to happen is that all these different haplotypes are well covered. So whoever is a data provider, in our case, obviously BC Platforms, we need to make sure that we have all major continents well established. We have access to all these different type of data sets and haplotypes, like I said. And then the quality of the data also dictates. So you have image data, you have genomics data, you have the longitudinal clinical data, all of that. If you can maximize the quality of that information, it will speed up the cycle of the innovations. So we don't think that there is an actual N. It keeps on evolving and developing, and a lot to do still with that data access and footprint.
And I guess with some things like cancer, there are probably lots of data, whereas with something like a very rare disease, there's probably less to work with.
Correct. Rare disease indeed is very complex. Going back to my point that you have to really have that coverage, you perhaps get to validate your hypotheses and algorithms with a very small N. eventually you have to replicate the results with another population and other locations, geographical locations that your models are applicable. We are trying to connect with all major healthcare systems to make sure that also rare disease opportunities can be covered. But truly, I think you are spot on. It's more complex. It requires more long-term investments. It doesn't happen overnight. But eventually, of course, over the time, we get to cover more and more.
I don't know whether it's one of the elephants in the room right now is artificial intelligence and machine learning, but it seems to have gone beyond healthcare to a point where people are concerned about artificial intelligence and machine learning in certain areas, not necessarily healthcare. Do you think that is going to potentially spill over into healthcare in terms of we're seeing the UK government talking about legislation for artificial intelligence?
I think it's happening already now. I think regulators, UK, European Union, they are fairly well already up to date what is going to be possible and what not. There are multiple initiatives and programs all across European Union countries where these topics are being addressed. How to actually anonymize, how to pseudonymize, what other regulatory aspects should be taken into consideration where sensitive data is being moved across the countries. If that happens. And I think there has been less concerns about the impact of the AI tools or machine learning tools per se. The major concern has been about the data sharing as such, that do you make it available or not. I would also say so that every continent now, the landscape is very competitive. And if you compare North America versus Europe versus China, all of these different continents have their strengths and weaknesses. As an example, some of these territories, they have more competence in developing these algorithms. So human talent to develop is stronger in some areas than the others. Then financial capacity and resources available to invest in this domain, also that differs. And then thirdly, the regulation, how easily that data is accessible for machine learning purposes, that also differs. So it's going to be interesting to see how the landscape plays out between different continents also during the next years.
And do you think that there's a variation between different sectors? Because I think one of the things that seems to be high in the media's priority, and not science media, but general media, is that it's going to be an end to humanity, whereas in science, it seems more to be a tool for analyzing more data and for improving things.
Yeah, I think we have the privilege to work in the life science and healthcare, where it's, I would say, fairly easy to demonstrate what is ethical impact of our doings. So it is a true win-win-win scenario that the healthcare system will win because the concepts are more preventive and predictive. We identify certain populations faster, what sort of a care and treatment pathways actually are functional. It is a win for the patients because they actually get that right treatment, which is really almost like a customized and tailored for them. You already mentioned rare disease cases where you have these certain patients that haven't had access to the care earlier. And then obviously for life science and pharma companies, it's going to be more cost effective to have these tools available, which ultimately, again, will benefit the taxpayers because you need to pay less for those solutions. So ethics around machine learning, AI, and data availability in healthcare is, I would say, easier to communicate and easier to address than in many other segments it would be.
Could you tell me a little bit about what BC Platforms does and how you work within the industry?
So BC Platforms indeed aims to be the most valuable data network and technology platform. So your questions about precision medicine is a centerpiece for us. We are doing that by integrating clinical and genomic data all across the globe together. So there are two assets where we invest and where we put our resources. Number one is a platform that integrates all this complex information and complex data sources into a single platform. And by doing so, and by having that single platform, we then build and develop a global data footprint. So our intent is to have as good coverage as possible and as fast coverage as possible all across the globe to clinical and genomic data. We call it the real world data, so that's the intent. Then in terms of the value chain, we also want to wrap the data and technology with the spot-on services, like well-defined services, understanding also the regulatory aspects of doing so. There's an element of services where we also want to be strong.
I guess that must be something that's quite difficult or quite constant in terms of the amount of work that you do, is just keeping up with changing regulations.
It is, but it's fundamental. We call this a trust business, and this regulatory landscape is dictating our operations. As an example, the ultimate frame is, of course, GDPR, but every country actually reads it and interprets GDPR slightly differently. There's a need to even go to this country-specific laws and regulations, and then even on a hospital level, you may have a set of rules and certain codes that you need to follow. So it has to be all the time part of your own R&D and development to understand the regulatory landscape.
You're not a young company. You've been around for quite a while, since 1997. So I imagine that the entire landscape has changed in those 25 years.
Truly so. More than 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when our company was established, we had lots of, I would say, scientific ambitions and scientific motivations inside PC platforms. So many of our employees, they did the science, executed the science. They know what it is to be actually in the pharma, developing those insights and so on. Then what happened next was the, I would say, awakening of the precision medicine on the healthcare practice. And now there's a big wave on the pharma once they start to understand what this real-world data can actually do and what is the power when they transform their own way of operating and their own research and development processes that are lengthy and very costly. So I would say that we have already seen 3 waves of the development during the past 25 years, and you just need to build that agility in the organization to keep on learning, and you need to have that motivation to learn.
I would assume that in 1997, there weren't too many companies in this space. I assume that there are a lot more now. How do you stay ahead?
Indeed, 25 years ago, there were not many companies that were into genomics and any other omics data per se, or real-world data, so to say. Now there are. And I would say that the pace is just increasing every year. The way that you stay ahead is to be well embedded globally in those ecosystems where innovations occur, so that you are always basically working with the best partners, best colleagues, best researchers. If that network does exist, then you also have a possibility to learn with the best and develop with the best. So that's maybe philosophically one way to do it. If you convert it also to financial terms, PC platforms need to invest organically in certain areas and capabilities. We are also systematically trying to scout now companies that we could or should acquire, because you always cannot develop also or partner with in certain areas. You also need to bring in new abilities and new functionalities. So that's maybe something new and a new process that we need to learn as well.
And I guess that's a perfect introduction to the recent acquisition of 4Pharma. I wonder if you could run me through the acquisition and what was so attractive about 4Pharma.
4Pharma has lots of similarities to BC. They were also established in 2002. They employ roughly 40 industry experts, professionals. These are either PhDs or otherwise well-established researchers in the area. They know how to use the data that we are collecting. It's a niche company, especially in our area, well-established customer base and a really top-notch reputation. The reason why we were interested on 4Pharma was that they have a certain number of services that are highly synergistic with the BC. As an example, they provide data management services to bring clinical evidence into a database. They have a solid understanding and expertise on statistics, so real expertise on planning and reporting. Medical services bringing statistics and clinical science together. And on these 3 capabilities, service capabilities, we have envisioned that now together we can further develop our own information technology when we want to protect and secure access to different data and different type of real-world evidence services that are enabling the market access. So lots of new opportunities beyond what pharma is doing today.
Maybe it's a little too early to say, but will it fold into your company, or will it work as a standalone and kind of go in its own direction and grow that way?
So the way we have envisioned the operating model is fairly straightforward. We have three assets: data asset and data network footprint. We have the technology asset, which is a unique and competitive, and now we have a service asset or service function. So all of these need to be solution-wise, they need to be integrated, and what customer is buying from us is ultimately a combination of all these three. But the unit is ready as a standalone, and then we aim to integrate the solution perspective in Matrix. But there's an ongoing business and existing customer base that we need to serve well, and we obviously don't want to compromise that high customer satisfaction by confusing too much in the day one and day two.
With you mentioning the future there, slipping back into the precision medicine discussion, what do you see as the future for precision medicine and also for your company within that space?
So today, biggest part of our customer base, it is a composition and consists of big pharma. So plus 20, the largest pharma companies globally. So what we envision as a company is to integrate data, technology, and related services in well-defined, impactful solution. And we envision this a combination to be powerful for discovery, for preclinical, for clinical, and post-first approval. So ultimately, this new type of assets, like I'm describing it generates concrete, time-related efficiency opportunities for pharma companies. So our intent is to be one of the market leaders in that segment. Obviously, we are looking in parallel also to the biotech sector, lots of interesting opportunities. We also envision that we have been able to tie in almost like a railway system, our data partners to this pharma company value chain. So what good looks like is that we have almost like a railway system or telecommunication network serving with well-secured, data privacy secured, data access interface, this value chain. And the benefits for the patients are faster, benefits for the healthcare community are faster, and the benefits for the pharma community is then faster.
And I assume that as things change and evolve, taking advantage of that is important as well.
Yes, you need to have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We have very sophisticated buyers and partners, and evolvement happens by understanding their therapeutic area needs and their pipeline. So it's really the biology and technology coming together. Our customers are true big professionals and very impactful game changers in the biology, and our job is then to bring in the relevant data and technology in it. So that whole transformation is driven by our clients' pipeline needs and strategic perspectives in it.
So I guess it's a kind of a feedback loop, or you have to go to them to find out what their needs are and then respond to that to exceed their expectations, I guess.
Correct. And they, of course, they try to look at strategic partners who can grow and develop and be agile with those changes. So ultimately, this is, like you said earlier, a very competitive area, and it requires constant investments. You cannot stay in one place, not even a day. You need to build the horizon for 3-4 years ahead all the time.
Absolutely. No, that's really interesting. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we haven't covered?
In terms of the market size, perhaps the landscape that we are looking at the moment is a real-world data space. It's a growth market. And the size of this market, like we see it, it's about 2 to 3 billion, perhaps by the end of 26, early 27. And the BC Platforms aims to be a market leader, a European market leader in that space. So to be a market leader, one has to have at least 10 to 15% of the overall reach of that market. So that's a good goal for us, concrete goal.
And that's it for another podcast. Rain is forecast for this weekend, so maybe I can sell the watering can to someone in Arizona. I'm already busy putting together next week's podcast, so I will take the opportunity to thank you for joining us, and I hope wherever in the world you are, you have a great week ahead. Take care and join us next week for another Beyond Biotech.